Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Wright. I'm Director of PharmAust Limited, and I welcome you to this general meeting of shareholders. I've been appointed to chair today's EGM. It's past the appointed time of 3:00 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time, and a quorum is present, so I declare the meeting open. Some of you may be familiar with the board, but for those who are not, Dr. Michael Thurn, he's the CEO. He joins me here in person. I've also got Dr. Roger Aston, Dr. Thomas Duthie, and Mr. Robert Bishop online. Mr. Neville Bassett is an apology, and also the Darcy family sends their apologies. After the formal part of the EGM, there'll be a shareholder presentation, which Michael will go through and answer some questions. So I'll assume you all would have read the notice of meeting, which has been circulated to all shareholders. So with the blessing of the meeting, I do not intend to read the notice in full. Before putting each of the resolutions formally, I will announce the details of proxies received and tabled by the company. Where entitled, the chairman's proxy votes will be cast in favour of all the resolutions. The ASX recommendations provide that voting on resolutions should be conducted by a poll rather than a show of hands. I'll read today's resolutions, and then a representative of Computershare will assist with voting via a poll. The final results of the poll will be announced to the ASX. So moving to the resolutions. Resolution 1 states to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment the following resolution as an ordinary resolution. That the issue of 21,066,952 placement shares and 23,574,171 placement options to institutional investors on the 22nd of December 2023 and the 2nd of January 2024 as part of a placement utilising Listing Rule 7.1 is approved under and for the purposes of Listing Rule 7.4 and for all other purposes on the terms set out in the explanatory statement. And I can advise that we've received valid proxies as follows. In favour of the resolution is 61 million, against is 1.2 million, and discretionary votes to the chairman, 33.8 million, with 3.6 million abstentions. Any questions on the resolution? Okay, moving to resolution 2, which is to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment the following resolution as an ordinary resolution. That the issue of 14.2 million placement shares to institutional investors on the 22nd of November 2023 and the 2nd of January 2024 as part of a placement utilising Listing Rule 7.1A is approved under and for the purposes of Listing Rule 7.4 and for all other purposes on the terms set out in the explanatory statement. Now, I can advise we've received valid proxies as follows. 60.9 million votes in favour, 1.2 million against, 33.8 to the chairman, and 3.6 million abstentions. Are there any questions on the resolution? Moving to resolution 3, reads as follows: to consider and, if thought fit, to pass with or without amendment the following resolution as an ordinary resolution. That the issue of up to 450,000 placement shares and 300,000 placement options to Sam Wright or his nominees is approved under and for the purposes of Listing Rule 10.11 and for all other purposes. I can advise that we've received proxies as follows: 66 million in favour, 4.8 million against, 33.8 million to the chairman, and 4.6 million abstentions. Any questions on this resolution? Okay. Resolution 4 is the ratification of advisor options. That the issue of 3 million advisor options to Blue Ocean Equities Proprietary Limited on the 21st of December 2023 under Listing Rule 7.1 is approved under and for the purposes of Listing Rule 7.4 and for all other purposes. We have received valid proxies as follows: 70.3 million in favour of the resolution, 4.6 million against, 33.8 million to the chairman, and 559,000 abstentions. Any questions on this resolution? Okay, moving to resolution number 5 is the ratification of issue of lead manager options, that the issue of 4 million lead manager options to Blue Ocean Equities on the 2nd of January under Listing Rule 7.1 is approved under and for the purpose of Listing Rule 7.4 and all other purposes. And we have received valid proxies as follows: 70.2 million in favour, 1.2 million against, 33.8 million to the chairman, and 4.1 million abstentions. Any questions on this resolution? Okay, moving to resolution 6, which is the ratification of issue of advisor shares, that the issue of 675,676 shares to Spark Plus Proprietary Limited on the 15th of December 2023 under Listing Rule 7.1 is approved under and for the purposes of Listing Rule 7.4 and for all other purposes on the terms set out in the explanatory statement. And I can advise that we have received 69.4 million votes in favour of the resolution, 1.2 million against, 33.8 million proxies at the discretion of the chairman, and 4.1 million abstentions. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our discussion on the item of business. We'll now adjourn the meeting while Rachel Crane from Computershare conducts the poll. The poll is being conducted on all of the resolutions to be considered today. If you have voted by proxy prior to the meeting, you do not need to complete a voting card. Your vote has already been recorded. You will note on your voting card that you may vote for, against, or abstain on each of the resolutions. If you wish to cast all of your votes either for, against, or abstain, you can do so by placing a mark in the appropriate box. If you're in attendance today as a proxy holder for a holder that recorded open votes, these votes are yours to cast at your discretion, and you can do so by marking your voting card on each resolution accordingly. If anyone has any questions about this process, please raise your hand. When you've finished filling in your voting card, please hold the card in the air for collection, and Rachel is walking around the room collecting votes. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, I now declare the poll closed. Computershare will independently collate and verify the votes, and the final results of the poll will be released to the Stock Exchange in due course. That concludes the formal business of the meeting, and I declare the meeting closed. We now have a shareholder presentation from Dr. Thurn, followed by a Q&A session. So I'll pass you over to Michael. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Welcome everyone to the EGM and this presentation. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been around Australia updating shareholders to give them an idea of what to look for in our phase 1 study readout that's due by the end of this month. So today, I just want to go through pretty much the presentation that was presented to investors during that roadshow, and also provide some explanation around the last 2 releases. So one on the survival data that was put out, and one on the pre-IND meeting responses from the FDA. So before we do that, just to backtrack a little bit, talk about the corporate overview of the company, and some people might have noticed by now that there's a different messaging in the company, a different messaging from the point of view that that, we're a mid-stage biotechnology company now, and we're targeting human neurodegenerative diseases. And there's a specific reason for that. And that specific reason is that, we firmly believe that monopentyl has the potential to not only be useful in ALS or motor neuron disease, but also be a way of targeting and treating Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, those other neurodegenerative disease that have that toxic buildup of protein or proteopathies that causes neuronal death. And the way that we access and treat and remove those toxic buildup of protein is through a process called autophagy. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation. But as you can see, I've only been with the company for this is my 6th month now. Been really, really enjoying it. Been enjoying getting out, talking about the story. It's a somewhat easy story to tell from the point of view that PharmAust is quite different from most biotechnology companies. By that, I mean, we have a program in motor neuron disease that doesn't really typically follow the blueprint of a biotechnology company listed here in Australia or overseas for that matter, in that our development program for motor neuron disease is somewhat truncated. And it's truncated because it's a rare disease. And typically you need to go through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. We have a shot now that we've received our feedback from the FDA through that pre-IND meeting, that after our phase 1 study results that are released next week, that we have the ability to potentially get accelerated approval just in one study. So we're one study, and that study only involves 210 patients away from potentially getting accelerated approval, but also full approval. And that full approval is potentially likely in the US and also in Europe. So we're now a global biotechnology company. So over the last 6 months, the share price has appreciated accordingly. And that's largely been around getting out, telling the story about monopentyl, about our efforts in tackling motor neuron disease. And along the way, there's been a good steady release of news flow. And that news flow has largely been around the progress of the phase 1 study, but also our efforts at engaging the FDA. And, we've hit some milestones in doing that. But importantly, those milestones have been hit in a timely fashion and in the fashion and timeline that we dictated that 6 months ago when I first went out and started talking about motor neuron disease, monopentyl, and the company. So everyone knows by now that we're repurposing a veterinary drug. That's important. It's a veterinary drug called monopentyl. And because we're repurposing that drug, it means that we're not starting back at ground zero. We've already got data that we can use to help accelerate the clinical development of monopentyl, either in veterinary application or as we're targeting more and more everyday human health application being motor neuron disease.
Sorry.
You're right. And over the last 6 months since joining, it's rapidly became obvious that where the company is heading, where the phase 1 study is heading, and where we want to be in 24 months' time. So in 24 months' time, we want to be in a position where we could potentially commercialize monopentyl for motor neuron disease. So was obviously necessary to bring on the help, the new hires, and a big part of that is John Clark. So John joined originally as a clinical operation manager. He's since been promoted to chief operating officer. John has many years' experience in running global clinical studies from phase 1 out through to post-marketing phase 4. So this next clinical study that we do for monopentyl and motor neuron disease is going to be a global study. It's going to be run in the US, it's going to be run in Europe, and it's going to be run here in Australia. So to have his expertise on board is fantastic for the company. The other aspect is that it's kind of unusual, and I sort of had to pinch myself to think that after phase 1, that within a very short period of time, the company could be commercializing monopental for motor neurone disease. So it was important for us to make sure that our manufacturing capabilities was up to scratch. And there's lots of different aspects that need to be taken into account when you're manufacturing a product. Has to be of the appropriate quality, has to be of the appropriate scale for us to be in a position to sell the drug. And that's sooner than everyone thinks. So we've brought on board Dr. Carol Worth. Dr. Carol Worth has over 30 years experience in pharmaceutical companies, being in a position to underline the quality associated with the manufacturing of those products in order for that product to be of the standard that's required for commercialization. So we're very fortunate to have Carol as part of the team. Carol has obviously history with monopental through her involvement by back in the day, Epichem, the subsidiary of PharmAust. So she is well versed in the manufacturing process for monopental. So we've assembled a pretty formidable team, and obviously that formidable team is only as formidable as its leader, and its leader is Dr. Roger Ashton, and everyone knows the background behind Roger, his experience with Arana Therapeutics, Cambridge antibody technology. That technology was used to generate the most valuable drug that's ever been made and made available to patients in Humira. So we've got a good pedigree, and we think that we can exploit everyone's skills and bring this product to market within a reasonable time frame. Not going to talk too much about the veterinary program other than to say that that's on a straight and narrow path. We have a field study that needs to be done in the US to support registration in the US. Motor neurone disease, different kettle of fish. So that's where the valuation is in the company. That's where the company is potentially worth $1 billion or more. We're going to have a readout of our phase 1 data next week. Everyone's anticipating that. The early signs are through the survival data that was released last week, is that we're on the right track. We've got something special here. And just to relay, some of the key stats that, I almost speak about every day, and I wish I wasn't speaking about these stats every day. There's no cure for motor neurone disease. The average life expectancy for someone with motor neurone disease is just over 2 years. There's only 4 drugs available currently that treat or try to treat motor neurone disease. The 3 drugs that we're most interested in that treat sporadic motor neurone disease. So sporadic motor neurone disease, or ALS, it makes up about 90% of the cases of motor neurone disease. They don't know what the genetic cause is of that sporadic motor neurone disease. So the 3 drugs that are currently available to treat that are Riluzole, Radicavia, and Rilivrol. And I've kind of spoken on many occasions about those 3 drugs. And those 3 drugs really offer limited life extension for someone with motor neurone disease. And our case study is Rilivrol, the last one that was approved back in September 2023 by the FDA. And the reason why that becomes our case study is that it was approved by the FDA. It received accelerated approval. That was back in September 2023. 87 patients. Only 87 patients was involved in that study, and it received accelerated approval. It sells for $158,000 in the US. It only extends life by 9 months. Can we beat that? Yeah. I think we can. I think we're onto something special here. What we're finding with Rilibriol is that it was on path to be $1 billion drug. Again, approved back in September 2022. First 2 quarters of last year, did 200,000 US. Approximately 3,600 patients were treated with Rilibriol. Q3 rolls around. 50% of those patients discontinued. They discontinued because of the side effect profile. Causes diarrhea. And in a patient population like this, that's definitely a no-go. So Rilibriol is, while it was on a trajectory there to be $1 billion drug and a very influential drug in the treatment of motor neurone disease, it's hit hurdles. There's still question marks over whether it actually prolongs life by 9 months. The phase 3 data, so remember it received accelerated approval back in September 2022. That accelerated approval was on that 87 patients phase 2 data. For it to receive full approval, it has to do a phase 3 study within 5 years of receiving that accelerated approval. That phase 3 study is underway. It's been completed. The study data is being analysed and it will read out in the next quarter. Chances are, based on all the other failures that have been occurring for drugs in the motor neurone disease space, that it's going to fail. So within a very short period of time, we may lose Rilibriol. 1, because of its side effects, but 2, because it may not stack up in that phase 3 study. So we're talking about a situation in a rare disease where there's very few treatment options available for patients with motor neurone disease. Just to reflect on monopentol and its mechanism of action. So we've spoken about this a lot. So the key word here is autophagy. Autophagy is that natural cleaning mechanism that all mammalian cells use to clean up metabolic waste, and in this case, a protein called TDP-43. And that TDP-43 is the pathology that's associated with ALS, motor neurone disease. It moves out of the nucleus. It's supposed to stay in the nucleus of the cell, but for whatever reason, there's a miscommunication. It moves out of the nucleus and starts to aggregate in the neuron, in the axon, which then leads to that toxic effect and the neuron degenerates. Monopentol, as simple as the mechanism is, it comes in like a vacuum cleaner, forms these lysosomes that then come in, digest up the toxic protein, the aggregation of TDP-43, breaks it down into its macromolecules, and that homeostasis is restored to the neuron. That's what we're targeting. That's what monopentol does. Given that it targets autophagy, and if you read the literature, the literature refers to it as autophagy as a hunter for aggregates. These aggregates, these build-up of toxic proteins, misfolded proteins, are a common pathology that's associated with Alzheimer's disease, Huntington's disease, multiple sclerosis, most neurodegenerative diseases. So we're potentially sitting on something big here. Not only is it going to be useful for the treatment of motor neurone disease, ALS, it could have the ability to treat these more prevalent disease indications. Why is that exciting? It's exciting because we then become very attractive to big pharma. So big pharma looks at this and they think, well, PharmAust has taken the low fruit approach. So they've taken the low hanging fruit approach by selecting an indication and using the rare disease attributes of that indication to speed up development of the drug and to get approval. Very truncated development, very truncated approval process. We get it approved for ALS. there's every likelihood that it can be used in those other disease indications, which are much more prevalent. So what does that mean? Larger market, more sales, hello, big pharma. That's what they're looking at. So on the back of our phase 1 study results, we'll be out there, assuming they're positive, we'll be out there talking up monopental, talking up autophagy, talking up its applicability in other neurodegenerative diseases to big pharma. And hopefully we move those discussions along, and who knows, we might get a licensing deal, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Just to give you an update on the phase 1 study. So as I mentioned before, the phase 1 top line results will be released next week. We aim for the end of the month, and we're on target to do that. What's interesting about this study is that, one, it involves patients with motor neurone disease, or ALS. 12 patients in total, 9 out of Victoria, 3 out of New South Wales. So 9 was with Professor Suzanne Mathis, and 3 was with Dominic Rowe at Macquarie University. One of the great attributes about this study is that we've been able to look at the longitudinal effects of monopental, both from a safety point of view, also from a survival point of view. But as of next week, we'll know how much monopental slows the rate of progression of motor neurone disease. That's the key readout next week. We've already got a handle on survival. That's a big tick. We know that it's, at the moment, those patients shouldn't be alive. Well, some of the patients shouldn't be alive. Let's go through this slide in a little bit more detail. So the study involved 2 groups of patients that progressively went up in dose level that was governed by a safety monitoring committee. Those patients successively reached the end of that study. Most of them were on drug for between 12 and 13 months. Those patients have now had the opportunity to move into a compassionate use program where PharmAust has supplied drug for their continual use. That compassionate use program ran for approximately 3 months. As of last week, we started to enroll patients, and we're up to 9. We'll have 9. All the patients at Susan Mathis site in Melbourne at Calvary, they'll all be enrolled into that open label extension study. So we'll be able to study, assist, collect efficacy, safety data for these patients for another 12 months. That becomes important because the FDA, they want to see long-term safety data. They want to see long-term survival data as a way of assessing this drug. So somewhat, I guess, serendipitously, we've been able to move these patients, start them in a study that was supposed to be over in a relatively short period of time, into a compassionate use program, and now into a 12-month extension study. The only reason why we've been able to do that is because they're all still alive. In fact, one of the inclusion criteria for that open label extension study is that they have to be able to swallow. And we'll look at some of the typical symptoms that are associated with the decline in motor neurone disease in a minute. But swallowing is about 2/3 of the way along that continuum from time of onset through to death. So all our patients, if they're able to enroll in this study, they're about, they haven't hit that 2/3 mark yet. Again, encouraging sign. So when we started the open label extension study, and you would have noticed at the beginning of the year, we put out a press release with regards to a partnership to Berry Consultants. Now, Berry Consultants are the consultants, the go-to consultants for ALS, for motor neurone disease in the US. They're the guys that stand up in front of the FDA and argue your case statistically that this drug is worth approval. We've been able to bring on board Berry consultants, and with their help, they were able to do a statistical survival estimation on those 12 patients. So when they ran the survival estimations and compared it against the PROACT database, and this is just not any database. This PROACT database has specifically been assembled for motor neuron disease, or ALS. It data collected from nearly 9,000 patients. And what Berry did was they took our one patient and compared in that database to about 30. That's where the power comes in this survival analysis. And it's not completely obvious in this slide, but they didn't compare it to one person in that PROACT database. They compared it against 30. So once they ran the survival analysis for those 12 patients, and the result came out, it meant that as of last week, the chances, the probability of all those 12 patients being alive today was less than 1,000. In fact, it was even less than that. And this was a pretty conservative estimate. So we're going into next week, the phase 1 data readout in a pretty promising, pretty amazing position, knowing on the back of this survival data that, we should see a slowing down of progression in our ALS patients. So what do we need to look for? So when the data comes out next week, and the best way to describe this is to compare the data that was assembled for the last drug that was approved for sporadic ALS, which is Relyvrio. So this is the drug that's worth $158,000, treats about 3,600 patients in the US, but it has safety issues. And, in a couple of months' time, when they release their phase 3 data, it may show that it doesn't work. So let's compare against the data that was used to support their accelerated approval with the FDA. And the key point here is the scale that they use, which is called the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis functional rating scale, and the score that you get. So a normal person would reach a score of 48. Person with motor neuron disease, you look at a number of different domains that look at gross motor, fine motor, bulbar, and respiratory, and you rate patient rates their ability to speak over a 5-point scale, so from 0 to 4, swallowing, respiratory, whether they're able to turn in bed, and that's where you add up to 48. So a normal person would have 48. And what you do over time, every month, you do that ALS FRS score, and that gives you the rate of decline. So if you started at 40 and ended at 20, it's not a good result. If you started at 40 and ended at 40, well, you're onto something amazing. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at that rate of decline. Let's focus on Relyvrio. So Relyvrio, they compared their results against the placebo. We don't have a placebo, but we have something that's very comparable to the placebo, which is the PROACT database. So we can generate a line like a placebo using the PROACT database. Relyvrio, when they went to the FDA, they showed data from their placebo-controlled trial, this data, and they also showed data from the PROACT database as supportive data. So we know the FDA accepts that. So Relyvrio, 25% slower decline, which gives you that 9-month life extension. And the important thing that we need to look at next week is that points per month, minus 1.24. We want to be better than that. If we're better than that, it means that our life extension is greater than 9 months. We're better than Rilipriol. If we get under 1, we get under 0.8, 0.7, 0.6, we're onto something special. So that's what you need to look out for. You need to look out how much slower we're causing the rate of decline in motor neurone disease, and that points per month differential and the slopes, and how we compare our result against the PROACT database. We've talked about this previously. In the first 12 months from diagnosis, the average mortality rate of someone with motor neurone disease is between 22 and 34%. Our patients, as of last week, the shortest time since diagnosis was 16 months. We're well past that 12 months. The longest is 48 months. Well past. Seeing 0 deaths. The data is going to look good. As I mentioned before, this continuum here, symptom onset, diagnosis, through to death, all our patients can still swallow. Great result. Let's talk about the pre-IND meeting response. So again, we're in an excellent position. Normally, you would wait until the end of your phase 2 to go to the FDA and get information from the FDA on your pivotal study, the design of that pivotal study. We're at phase 1. We haven't even completed our phase 1, but we've been to the FDA and said, well, this is our pivotal study. This is what we want to do. The FDA came back, gave us some great information, great positive feedback on the design of that study. We didn't design it. Berry Consultants designed it. They've designed many, many, many ALS studies. They were the chief study design technicians behind the Healy platform trial. Healy platform trial is that trial that's going on in the US at the moment, where promising new drugs become an arm in that study and have the opportunity to be accelerated through the development program, to be accelerated in front of the FDA for potential approval. We've received positive feedback on that phase 2, adaptive phase 2/3 study, to the point where if we hit the endpoints that we suggested to the FDA, that we're in a great position to potentially receive accelerated approval. Likewise, if we go out to 48 weeks, so that's after 24 weeks, accelerated approval. If we go out to 48 weeks for that study, we have an opportunity to receive full approval. In Europe, the 24 weeks approval process doesn't exist. We have to go out to 48 weeks. So this study not only will give us an audience with the FDA, but it will give us the opportunity to interact with the EU and potentially get approval in Europe. So 65% of the market's in the US, roughly 30% is in Europe. So we're covering pretty much the entire market by doing this approach. One study, 210 patients, 140 on active, 70 on placebo. Not a big study. It's going to cost us between 20 and 30 million to do that study. The other great bit of information that came back from the FDA was that we asked them pretty much at the 11th hour before we put in the pre-IND meeting. So when you front up to the FDA or request a pre-IND meeting with the FDA, you pose questions. We pose questions about our manufacturing. We pose questions about our clinical trial design. We also pose questions to the FDA around how many sites in the US, what's the minimum number of American patients we need to include in this study in order for them to either give us accelerated approval or full approval. typically the FDA, they approve drugs for Americans. They don't approve drugs for Australians. They don't approve drugs for Europeans. They'd like to see the drug tested in Americans. Because this is a rare disease, there's limited treatment options available. The FDA came back and said, we're happy for you to do the entire study outside the US. We will still look at the data and approve on that data. So knowing that, what does that mean? It means that we can go for the global study. We can adjust that study accordingly, depending upon the recruitment rate in Europe, in Australia, in the US, to make sure that that study is recruited in an appropriate time frame. Excellent result. So again, single clinical study was sufficient for PharmAust to be in a position to receive accelerated approval in the US or full approval in the US and Europe. Great result. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about, I think, the presentation that I had 6 months ago was talking about rare diseases in general and the huge uptick in the number of rare disease transactions, deals that were going on. Well, this data just drills down into rare central nervous system diseases. So we're obviously fit beautifully within that category. But what this slide shows you is that, like what I presented before, there's still a huge appetite for big pharma and mid pharma to look at doing deals pretty early on for rare CNS diseases. So for the 10 months up to October last year, there was 49 deals done in CNS, rare CNS diseases. And again, the reason why they're doing this is because they see it as a way of getting access to a much larger market, get it approved quickly, get the orphan drug disease designation, which we have applied for, to get that 7 years market exclusivity, give them an extra momentum to be able to prescribe off-label for a more prevalent disease. So there's two lines that I want to emphasize here. And the first one is the deal that was done by Takeda last year in September. They did and this is just for ALS. So there was 2 deals done last year for motor neuron disease, ALS. The preclinical deal that was done was for a license for an ALS drug, US $580 million. Preclinical. We're not at preclinical, we're at phase 1. The comparable for us is the deal that was done back in March last year. So at phase 1, there was almost $1 billion deal done just for ALS. Now, remember before I talked about autophagy, monopental, potentially being able to be used in other neurodegenerative diseases. So if the phase 1 deal was a licensing deal for $1 billion just for ALS, but we potentially have applicability in other neurodegenerative diseases, surely we must be above $1 billion. So this will be interesting. Once our phase 1 study results drop next week, then we'll be out engaging with big pharma, engaging with mid pharma to see where we fit, to see what the interest is in monopental, what the interest is in PharmAust. So again, exciting times for the company. So what to look out for? And before I talk about that, this is, I cannot emphasize more without Susan Mathers and Emma. So Emma is the clinical trial study coordinator at Calvary. Without their dedication to their patients, without their dedication to PharmAust, without their dedication to monopental, we wouldn't be here today. They've been outstanding, to the point where Susan goes beyond anything that you can imagine, even to the point where she will go down to a warehouse and pick up tablets and take them, deliver them herself to her patients. She's that dedicated. We are so fortunate to have Susan a part of this study. So what to look out for in for the rest of Q1, obviously data reads out. That data, it's all good to have data, but without an advisory board there to point us in the right direction, to nut out those fine details around our study design for our adaptive phase 2/3 study, then we need that input. So look out for the formation of a scientific advisory board, and that scientific advisory board will be world-class.
And will that be announced?
Yeah. So, and the other thing that that we've got to look out for is and I didn't go into too much details, is that we requested an orphan drug disease designation from the FDA. That was submitted back in November. The FDA came back, and it was one of those situations where you might have got the timing wrong on that one, from the point of view that it was so close to the data being available that the FDA has sat back in their chair and said, well, show us the phase 1 data, and then we'll give you the orphan drug designation. It would have been interesting to go into that application with the survival data. That probably would have been enough to get them over the line. So we're in a position, following the release of the data next week, to rapidly go back to the FDA, file that amendment. They didn't reject it, which they could have. They said, no, we'll give you an opportunity to amend your application, come back as quick as you can, and we'll look at providing you with that orphan drug disease status, granting that ODD. On the back of the phase 1 study results, we'll move as quickly as possible as we can to get this phase 2/3 study up and running. It's most definitely going to start in Australia first, and then roll out in those other jurisdictions in the US and Europe. It's a much easier pathway. We don't have to go through an IND process. We don't have to go through a similar kind of process in Europe. We can move quickly here, given that the ethics committees are already familiar with monopentol for use here in Australia. So we're in a position to potentially start this trial mid-year, so June, July timeframe. Any questions?
Assuming the results next week, which I'm sure there will be, how are we going to fund it?
Great question. That's the $30 million question. So there's a couple of ways that we can look at doing that. I mean, we put out a press release just before Christmas to say that we've been invited back to submit a full application to fight MND. There's an opportunity to put 2 mil through that fight MND, but there's also opportunity that the way that they look at funding at the moment is changing. So they're talking about the possibility of equity positions in companies. So there's possibility of getting more than 2 million from fight MND. The ODD designation from the FDA, that opens up getting funding clinical trials from the FDA. There's this thing called the Healy platform trial as well, and that comes with funding. It's subsidized through Neil's consortium. There's an opportunity there. As Jerry pointed out, when the share price hits 30 cents, he's going to convert all his options. So there's $18.9 million there in options. So whether there's a way of using that pool of money, depending upon what the share price is, but you would like to think there would be more share price appreciation on the back of the results. So there's that avenue, and then of course there's the avenue of doing another capital raise. So
And R&D rebate.
And the R&D rebate on top of that. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking to institutions. We're now at that market cap where we're on their radar. So I think, on the back of strong study results, it opens up all those different possibilities. So again, for a biotechnology company to be in this position with all these different options, I'm very lucky.
And would that be advantageous compared to taking on a partner or keeping ownership?
Yeah. So the phase 1 data is going to be pivotal to obviously get engagement from a partner. What we don't know is what the interest level is going to be, whether this is an auction process, whether they want to find or look at a program that's a little bit further advanced, a bit more de-risked. But the issue here is that you just got to look at that last slide. As you get further up the tree, you got to put out more money. So do they want to wait? Do they want to gamble? What do they want to do? Is it a licensing deal? Is it a co-development deal? Is it straight acquisition? PharmAust is in that position, unlike most other companies, to be acquired because we're so clean. We're clean from the point of view we have one drug, monopentyl, and essentially one program, motor neuron disease. That would be attractive. Yeah.
Following that through with the dogs, we're walking down the road because we're halfway down the place.
Yeah.
Walking down. From a timing perspective, the trial that's going on with that, the big trial, the MND trial,
Yep.
the longer trial, relatively speaking, does the dog trial be somewhere along that spectrum where there's some chance it might go on raise funds for that? And I'm assuming that's not the focus, so we're not giving the focus, we happily do some type of thing and move on to whatever extent.
Yeah. So just to repeat the question, been asked to repeat the question is where does the veterinary program fit in? Can it be used to offset the costs associated with the phase 2/3 study? And the answer is there, yes. There is an opportunity for PharmAust. The big trigger here, I think, for PharmAust is that we need to get that feedback, open that INAD with the FDA, and that really signals a significant milestone for potential partners. So that's within reach, and obviously is required to do that pivotal field study. But you're right, it's it is a distraction. Motor neuron disease, the potential that we have with monopentyl for motor neuron disease, it's insignificant compared to what we can command as a valuation and as a deal for motor neuron disease. Yeah.
That was a forerunner to human cancer, that's where we started.
Yeah.
Way back when. So I suppose two parts to that question. Is cancer being part with all the other things for the neurological side of it? And which I'm not against, by the way, but it's just a question. And from the neurological side, and this is a bit of a hypothetical, the current formulation that we've got for monopentyl, for these other diseases, I'm assuming we'll just go into that because we don't have any different.
Yeah. So the question from the floor is, better get this right. So the current formulation that we use for motor neuron disease, has that got applicability in other disease areas, i.e. oncology? The company was focused on oncology. Have we completely parked oncology in humans? And I guess in this point in time, yeah, we probably have. Yeah. During the discussions that I've had with various investors, one of the things that they were keen to hear was that we're talking about life cycle management of monopentyl. So again, we're in phase 1 and we're talking about life cycle management. We're talking about commercialization. It's quite incredible, but yeah, we are talking about life cycle management, and part of the life cycle management is developing a liquid formulation of monopentyl, because we want to be able to treat patients that can, that coming down the future that cannot swallow with monopentyl. So it becomes more valuable by having a liquid formulation. And it's a way of increasing the patent protection as well for monopentyl, for the use in neurodegenerative diseases. So it becomes an important part, and that's something that we have currently underway here in Australia, and we hope to report on that, definitely in the next quarter.
Would that go to some from intravenous?
No, so this is, purely oral. Yeah. So one of the issues with one of the current drugs, that's the drug that extends life by 6 months, edavarone, radicavia, is its IV administration. They've done the right thing, so they've gone the other way in terms of life cycle management. They've gone from an IV formulation into an oral formulation. The oral formulation, the readout was about 3 weeks ago. It failed. So now there's talk that the FDA are going to remove edavarone radicavia completely because it failed a large study. So yeah, they've gone the other way. We're talking about developing a liquid formulation as a substitute for taking tablets. So it'll be orally delivered. It's just easier to take a liquid formulation as opposed to tablets in someone that, obviously has difficulty in swallowing, or has lost that ability to swallow.
We see the irony considering you signed.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we come full circle, but yeah, full circle for a good reason. And there's so the good thing about the liquid formulation, it builds in an extra layer of IP protection, which could be potentially important down the track, but potentially important to add an extra zero on that deal that's done with Big Pharma.
Progressing it to go down the Parkinson's and
Yep.
we have to do a phase 2-3 study or whatever.
Yeah, we won't be doing that. No, that'll be a partner. Yeah, we're providing them with the tools to do that. They're going to pay us a lot of money for those tools, but yeah.
So the problem with this oncology is the cost, absorbing cost of the trials.
It is, yeah. So, I started off with an oncology drug that was 25 odd years ago. And, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be involved with a company that was developing an anti-cancer drug. Fast forward that to today. Do I want to be involved with an oncology drug? No. They're just too hard to develop. Too hard to develop. You've got trials that last forever. You've got trials that cost a bomb. We are so fortunate to be in a position where our next study is our last study, 210 patients, $20 to $30 million. What more could you want? I mean, really, at the end of the day, to spend that $20 to $30 million to potentially be, $5 billion company. Remember Amylyx Pharmaceuticals, on the back of their results, not the approval, on the results of their phase 2 study in 87 patients, their market cap was $2.5 billion. US. We have a shot at that.
In the past, there was delays in the tablet manufacturing process, as we move into the next phase. Have we, other delays sort of, we've dealt with that now, we're moving ahead, we've got tablets on hand, and we're also manufacturing more?
Yeah, we're actually making our placebo batch in the next couple of weeks. So we're, yeah.
Not sourcing ingredients from China, which.
No. Yeah, so we've been proactive on that front. We're making our placebo batch. We've got to make that a few times, but yeah, we've started that process because there's some nuances around that. The tablets have to be identical, so that it just in color. So that our development batch, perfect. Now moving on into a GMP batch that'll be used in that adaptive phase 2/3 study. So we're well ahead of the curve there.
All very exciting and I'm sure it'll go well and like the world will come to the company. But apart from that, you know, I suspect I'm the only program, which amazes me. And is there an investment relations sort of component beyond clinical results and the market coming to the company?
Yeah, so this is a question for Matt Baker. So Matt Baker's listening in on this call, and actually I want to take a minute to praise Matt. Matt's been fantastic for the company. He's opened a lot of doors, put us in front of a lot of investors, and really he was instrumental in the company securing that 3.5 million before Christmas. That was done at market in an environment that was, other companies were doing 25-30% discount. He's been fantastic for the company. Where, you know, I'll be honest, yeah, we're talking to other brokers. Not because we've been ringing them, because they've been ringing us. Exhausted? It's got to be a hard question. Come on. No, next week is hopefully it's going to be a fantastic result for the company. It really sets us up. Having the pre-IND meeting in our back pocket now, it gives us certainty around what we need to do. Gives us certainty around what we need to raise in order to complete and get accelerated approval, full approval.
Can I just say,
Yeah.
Michael, thank you. Probably something that a lot of us would like to say. Turn the company around in 6 months, like a breath of fresh air.
No, thanks. No, yeah, I've enjoyed the journey. You know, we've got a great team, and like I said, you know, a lot of the kudos has got to go to Matt Baker. He's certainly, he's been fantastic to work with, and he's at Blue Ocean. Yeah. No, fantastic. Thank you.